Okay, so welcome back to my channel. I am Jason, and this is from Sin's Perspective Reviews. I am back with another recap of Lupin. We already know that I'm going to butcher the name, so just bear with me. Season 1, episode 2. So, if you're interested in hearing what I have to say, stay tuned. Okay, so the episode opens with the shot of a prison, okay, and then you see this guy being walked in, and you realize that it's Arsène. You're like, oh, okay, so what's happened? Why is he at the jailhouse? Why is he at the prison house? And then you quickly realize that it's about some shit. It's for a reason, okay. So we flash back 2 days earlier. He's talking to his friend Benjamin. This is the guy who made the forgery for him. With the Queen's necklace, and he's having him examine the necklace, and his friend is telling him, like, no, this necklace is pristine, nothing, it hasn't been altered at all, everything is original. And he, Lupin was Arsène was trying to figure out, okay, so the story behind the necklace was that, it was lost all this time, and, pieces of it, were, sold off, or the necklace at some point was separated and they were able to get all the pieces and put it back together. And he's telling them, and Benjamin is telling him that, no, there is no sign that this necklace has ever been altered. And so, he's kind of confused. He says, so if that's true, then he's now realizing that, the Pellegrinis lied on his father. And he was like, for 25 years, I thought that he was guilty, but the whole time he wasn't. And so now he kind of feels guilty at this point. Okay, so then there was this flashback. Arsène, he's in the apartment eating breakfast, and next there's this knock at the door. Well, not really a knock. It was like almost like a SWAT knock, like somebody's about to knock the damn door down. And the person identified himself as the police. And initially he didn't want to open the door, but he did, and the person pushed their way in. And he looked around, and he asked him if he was there alone, and Arsène was like, well, no, my mother is going to be here in a few minutes. And so the officer basically told him, okay, so then we'll just wait for her. At this point, they know that his mother has passed on, and the officer is there to take him into custody, to put him in the system. I hope my audio is still working. To put him in the system. And so he told him to go pack a bag. And initially, Arsène, he didn't really want to. And so he kind of yelled at him. And eventually he got up and he went to pack the bag. And so when the officer's back was turned, he climbed out the window. And he, that was scary to watch. He jumped to the next balcony over and kind of went through their apartment to go out. But unfortunately, at that point, the officer already realized that he was gone. And he caught up with him in the hallway and took him away. Next, you see Juliet stops by to see Anna, her mom. This is Juliet Pellegrini. And, they talked a little bit, and she was telling her mom how, after she leave there, she's going on her way to the foundation. And she talked about the necklace. The mom was, talking about the necklace, how, when they, forensics did their thing, they realized that the necklace was a forgery, and how her father is upset because they've lost the necklace. And the mom was like, what did she say? You said you lost it 25 years ago and it's gone again. This, like karma, or she said something to that effect. At this point, the Pellegrinis are no longer together. They're living separate lives. She lives in this gorgeous, apartment. And I guess he's still at, the estate that they had. So they are no longer together. And she basically, Anna basically told her daughter that, it's one thing you need to understand about your father. You're either with him, that his mindset is you're either with him or you're against him, and there's no in between. So as Juliet was leaving, the front desk person handed her a note, and the note basically said to the person wanted to meet her in Luxembourg Park. And inside the envelope was a stone. Now, flashing back to when Arsène was talking to Benjamin, he asked him to remove one of the stones, and Benjamin initially didn't want to do it. And Arsène was like, you know what, I know what I'm doing. So I'm assuming that was the stone. That was why he wanted him to remove the stone, so that she would have proof that whoever's contacting her actually has the necklace. And so she kind of storms out. So they flash to Arsène. He's in this bright orange get up with the little backpack, like he's like Uber Eats or Postmates or something. And so he's like on different on phones, like placing orders or whatever the case may be, right? So he makes it to the park, and he goes over to talk to her, and she basically said, "So how much do you want?" And so he took his mask down, and immediately she recognized him. He basically said, "I don't want money, I want answers." And before she could say his name, he realized that she was wearing this pendant or something that was clearly a microphone. So he covered that before she could say his name. And so they talked, and he basically wanted to know about the next, why they lied about his father. And she was like, "What are you talking about?" She told him that she realized that she admitted that she knew that his father did not steal the necklace, and that her father bought the necklace back from South African jeweler 5 years ago. So like I said in the first video, I'm assuming that maybe the company was having some financial issues, and of course that necklace is worth millions of dollars, and he needed an infusion of cash or whatever the case may be, and sold the necklace. So they started talking. They continued to talk, and as they were talking, he could see like the police all around them. While they were talking, you had the police in the van, trying to get visual and audio, but they realized that the audio was jacked up because he was covering the mic. And then you saw like cops around them kind of acting casual, like they're just hanging out in the park or jogging, or, one was pushing a stroller that had a camera. But the thing is, they weren't able to get a visual of his face. And so, eventually the officers are going crazy, and, the captain is in there, and he realized that they are so close together and they're talking. It was quite obvious that, okay, she knows this person. And so at that point, they decided to go in. But he was, a little bit quicker. He had his little bike, and he was, moving, ducking and dodging and swerving and doing what he needed to do to get on. And so they quickly realized why he chose that place. Because I guess all those orders he was placing was so that he would have a number of delivery people in the park in that same location. So they were all dressed alike. It's like this standard uniform that they're supposed to wear. This bright orange jacket with this bright orange the bag that they would carry the food in. I'm assuming that also for safety reasons, traffic and all, that you wear brighter colors so people can see you. You're on the bike. And so before they knew it, it was like 6 or 7 people on bikes, like just going to what they, I guess, working. And so he was able to slip out. So as they were exiting the park, these are the other delivery people. The officers pulled up. They had the guns drawn on the people. They snatched one of the guys down off his bike and pulled his mask off. It was a hot mess. So at this point, the captain is pissed because he knows that Arsène got away. And so he, basically took off the bright jacket and put on his standard, trench, whatever, and he kind of had his little smirk, and he walked on and continued on with his day. So that was funny. That man was so hot. I was so pissed. I would have been like filing a claim on police brutality the way he snatched that man off that bike, slammed him on the ground, basically ripped his mask off. That was a bit much. Arsène, he makes it back to his hideout or whatever the case may be, and he is looking in this briefcase. He still has his father's leather gloves, and then you see he's pulled out this letter. And so this letter was given to him. It was a confession that his father signed a confession, basically saying that he stole the necklace, and that he was ashamed of himself and the whole thing. And it was something that stood out in the letter. There were 2 grammatical errors, and there was a quick flashback of his father kind of dinging him for making errors, and to take his time and to make sure that he's getting his spelling and punctuations correctly. So he realized, like, okay, wait a minute, this short letter has like 2 errors in it. He realized that's not something that his father would ever do. And so he to him, it was more behind it. Okay, so he pulled up his dad's arrest record, and he was, doing some research trying to find out, I guess, just find out whatever he could find out. And so he ends up taking a letter to his friend, Benjamin, and, trying to explain to him there's more behind his letter, and, my father wouldn't have, made these errors. And of course, Benjamin is like, okay, that's just a coincidence. A lot of people misspell words. It happens all the time. And he realized that in his research that the errors that his father made was commit and La Bibliothèque, which I know is libraries. And so he was like, well, when he did his research, his father's cellmate was named Etienne Commit, so Comit, which is the same spelling. And La Bibliothèque libraries, he worked in the library. This is his cellmate. And so he's like, no, there's more to this, and I'm going to find out, what it is. And so his way of finding out what it is basically to pose as a prisoner. And so how he was able to do that is I don't know how he came up with this particular person. I'm not sure, but his name was Jabri. I don't know. We're going to go with Jabri. Okay. And he had never seen, they don't know each other. And so basically Arsène was telling him that he wants to trade places with him. And of course the guy's like, okay, you sound crazy. How am I going to get out of here with all this security? And I got the handcuffs and the whole thing. And he basically told him that, he had a time where the guards changed shift, which happened while they were talking. And he realized that the guy was being transferred that day, and the prison that he was going to, nobody knew who he was. So of course nobody knew what he looked like. So it was the perfect time. So Arsène was able to get the handcuffs off of him, put him on himself, and they took him away like he was Jabri, and the other guy apparently he slipped on out. And so back at the prison, you see Arsène, he's been walked to his cell. And there was a quick flashback of him when he was a young boy, and he went to the private school, and the guy was walking him to his room and kind of talking to him. And it was, he kind of had that quick flashback because it was all kind of similar in a way, And so we flash to Juliet. Juliet is now talking to the captain, and the captain is telling her, like, we don't have any audio, and it was obvious from what we saw that you weren't strangers. And she basically used her family to basically told him that he needed to change his tone, or basically that she would have his job. And you see, he kind of piped down, and he was clearly afraid of her family, her father's connections. And she basically said, if you're going to arrest me, then my lawyer will have me out here in no time. And he basically said that, well, no, there's no need for all that. I just want to know what you guys talked about. And she said, okay, we talked about how the police officer investigating this case is a moron for bringing my family a fake necklace or something to that effect. Of course, he was offended by that. And she basically, said what she had to say, and she got up and she walked out. And of course, he was not happy about that. So back at the prison, Arsène is on the yard. They're playing basketball, and eventually he saw these 2 guys standing off to themselves. And he walked over and he asked about Etienne, and they wanted to know why he was asking about him. And so he had some cigarettes he traded with them, and they told him his cell number, which was I think cell 241 or something to that effect. Back at the police station, police inspector Youssef, he's still trying to make connections between the stories in the book and this individual. He realized that all of the aliases that this individual used is an anagram for Arsène Lupin, this book that talked about this jewel thief or con artist or whatever the case may be. He's realizing that all of their names surrounding these stories. So he's still working on that. So back at the prison, Arsène is delivering sheets and he delivered to Etienne's cell. Etienne's cellmate basically said that he's not here and he's probably not going to be back. So he's in the infirmary for some odd reason. And so before he could finish doing what he was doing, these two guys jacked him up and basically said that Jabri basically owed them money. He either owed them money for drugs or he owed them a certain quantity of drugs or something to that effect. And they gave him Arsène, who was posing as Jabri, a certain amount of time to get the drugs or the money or something. Drugs or the money. He's like, okay, well that's not a problem. So he ends up going to the infirmary, and the doctor was like, okay, so what's the problem? He said, well, it started out with my stomach. I think I'm pregnant. And she kind of chuckled a little bit, and she was like, well, I seriously doubt that's the problem. I understand that the first nights are forced, that when you first start out here, it's difficult, but you're a big guy. You have to basically, you got to work it out. And she said basically she would not be keeping him in the infirmary overnight, and basically sent him on his way. So Yusuf, he's still going over all of this information that he has. He ends up grabbing Sophia, who's another officer, and he's telling her about the connection and the anagrams and the whole thing. And she's telling him that the captain is really not in the mood, and you may as well tell him about some other, fairy tale. Like, she really is just this flights of fancy. She's really not buying into what he has going on. And she kind of walked away. You kind of see he felt kind of a little deflated. And then he looked over at the captain, who was chastising some other officers. He wasn't even bashful about it. He was just yelling at these officers. And so she kind of took, he took Sophie up on her offer. Like, I wouldn't bring this up to the captain. He's having a bad day. So we just going to go ahead and let that go. For now, we're going to go on and let that go. So back at the prison, they're back on the yard, and Arsène ends up approaching the two guys who he's supposed to get these drugs for. And he's asking them, like, how am I supposed to get these drugs in here? And the people are like, well, what are you doing? Why are you talking to us? Like, they couldn't figure out, like, okay, this is not how this thing is work. You get the stuff, and then we make an arrangement to get the stuff. And he's asking them how they're supposed to do that and how he's supposed to get the drugs. And eventually one of the guys pulled out a shank and stabbed him in his side. So he's now in the infirmary, which is where he wanted to be all along. And so he had to get a couple of stitches. And so she ends up keeping him overnight. And she basically told him that he needed to make useful friends. That was her word. And so when she got him all patched up and got him all situated, he was able to locate Etienne, and she tried to talk to him. It's obvious that the man is sick. He's really sick. It could be we don't know why, but he look pale and drawn, like he has cancer or something. He's not well. And so he started asking him if he remembered his father, Babacar Deep, and initially he said yes, and he was like, wait a minute, is that the guy that stole the necklace? And of course Arsène is like, no, he was framed, he didn't really steal the necklace. And then he told him that, I don't know your father. And Arsène was confused, like, what are you talking about? He was like, I only met him once, and that was because he asked about a book, and I got the book for him. And then he told him that when he returned the book, he had left something, the dad had left something in the book, and the dad always knew that someone would come, I guess, to investigate or to, figure out what really happened to him. And he wanted him to keep the book and to pass it along. And so Arsène asked him if he still had the book, and he was like, well, I think so. I think it's, somewhere in my things. So after that, Arsène had to go back to his bed because the officer came in to check on to make sure that, all was well. So there was a flashback of Arsène. He's reading the Bible. So when he initially arrived at the school, I don't know if that was the headmaster or who he was, who was, showing him to his room, his bed, gave him a Bible. And so he's sitting on the bench and he's reading the Bible, and the headmaster walks over with an envelope, and he told him that when they cleaned his father's cell, they had found this letter. And of course, that was the letter where he confessed to the crime and basically, talked about how sorry he was in the whole thing. And, he kind of talked to him a little bit about, who he could be and how he could be a better man. you know, how he's happy that he's reading the Bible and, you know, the whole thing. And so he walked off. So eventually, as he walked off, you realized that he wasn't actually reading the Bible. He actually had the Arsène Lupin book in between. So he was actually reading that and not the Bible. So he was, you know, doing his thing. Okay. So the next day, Arsène went to Etienne's cell. He was making another delivery with the towel sheets or whatever the case may be. The Etienne's cellmate let him in, and he was able to go through his things, and he found another Lupin book. And he kind of quickly flipped through it, but then the officer was trying to figure out what was taking him so long, and so he kind of stuffed it and had to walk off. And so you flash to Claire and Raoul, his son, and he's reading the book that his dad gave him. He's really into this book. His mother's talking to him, and he barely listening to her. She's asking him about how he's doing in school and, you know, what's going on in his life. And he's all in this book, and he's really not. He's like giving her half answers and the whole thing. And she was like, "You mean to tell me you like reading this book more than you like playing video games?" And she was like, "Okay, imagine that." She was happy. Like, I'm glad your behind is not set propped in front of the TV, and you're actually developing your mind. I'm sorry if you can hear that. My cell phone's going off. So she was happy about that. So she didn't even press it. Like, okay, he reading instead of playing the video game. Okay, we just gonna go with that. We gonna leave him. We gonna let him do that. So later that night, Arsène was in his cell and he's flipping through the books. And initially, it didn't make sense. He's like, I don't really see anything. And then he realized, by flipping through the book, that certain letters were kind of marked. Certain letters were highlighted in a way. Certain letters were, certain words were crossed out. And so when he wrote all of that down, he realized that he said, I'm innocent, trapped by Anna Pellegrini. Anna is obviously the mother of Juliet. So, there was a knock at the door and the officer is bringing them their food. And so one of the guys, it was one of the inmates who was delivering the trays of food. And so the inmate, he handed Assange's cellmate the tray. And as he was about to get Assange's tray, the officer stepped in, grabbed the tray, spat in this man's food. I mean, I can't imagine he would have eaten that anyway. And basically told him that Bogdan hopes you enjoy your meal, and he'll be by to tuck you in tonight. So, okay. So, Juliet is now at the estate. She's talking to her father, who's now an older man. He got a little cane and everything. And you can tell she was kind of nervous of bringing it up, but she asked about the necklace and if the necklace was stolen 25 years later. And he went off talking about, we're dealing with all this stuff. This priceless necklace is nowhere to be found, and we need this necklace. And you're asking me about stuff that happened long ago. And eventually, like, he flashed on her. And then he apologized. And he's like, I spend my days being attacked by people. And then he looked at her and got real serious and was basically like, I can't take that. I don't know if I can. Well, when it comes from you, it's a lot worse. But it was like really sinister the way he said it and the way he was staring at her. And then he walked over to her and kind of caressed her face in some creepy way and was like, I know that you're with me. And she said, yeah, she was. And I guess it was his way of saying, you're either with me or you're against me. And he went over to have a drink. You kind of see her reflection. And she's just like, oh, okay, this is something else going on here. But she was too afraid to even say. Okay, so back at the prison, Son is back on the yard. And the two guys saw him and they were about to walk over to him. But the guys threw the ball to him. And he tried to throw the ball. He jumped up and to dunk the ball, but he ended up busting his stitches. And so he ended up back in the infirmary, and she ended up having to patch him up. And he asked about Etienne, like how was he doing, and she kind of made the face like, I mean, at this point, I guess basically she's doing what she can to keep him comfortable, but I mean, it's inevitable. And he asked if he could talk to him. And so he walked in and talked to him for a little while. And he's like, I think she likes you. He was talking about the nurse. And Etienne kind of, chuckled a little bit. And he asked if he found the book. He told him he did. And he asked him he wanted to ask him a favor, and he asked him, can you find a way to make my wife smile, since I won't be able to do it again? And that was kind of sad. And he, agreed that he would, he would do that for him. He did that. And, they talked a little bit longer. And then he, as the son was leaving, and he talked to the doctor a little bit. He kissed her hand, and he basically said his goodbyes to her. Raul, he's still reading this book. It's weird. In the way hours of the night, his mom walks in and basically told him, okay, it's bedtime. You need to get some rest. And she, basically had him, turn the lights out and put the book away and get into bed and go to bed. So, that night at the prison, the officer that spat in Hassan's food, he ends up unlocking the cell to one of the prisoners, and he ends up also unlocked Hassan's cell. So you saw the guy who was wrapping, I don't know if that was a towel, pillowcase, whatever it was, around his hand, like you could see he was going to go in there to strangle Hassan. But the doctor, she was walking down the halls. I guess they heard some noise. And so she was walking down the hall, and she found Hassan in the shower, who he hung himself. And so she's, upset and distraught, and, they're trying to, at this point, get him down. Then you flash to they get him down, get him into the body bag, and get him into the ambulance. And so the guy goes back to his cell, and he asks him if he had, taken care of that. And then you flash to when he went to the cell to look in, and you realize that he wasn't there. And so he only had, I can't imagine he had a lot of time, because as soon as the officer opened the other guy's cell, he opened, like, I can't, but somehow he was able to get out and get into the shower to hang himself. Okay. So the body is now, the body's now in the back of the ambulance. They're leaving the prison. And it's flashing back and forth to Ro reading the story. And then it goes into what he did. So when he dunked the ball, he actually pulled the netting down, which nobody realized. And I wonder if he put the netting down so when they zapped him, I guess to try to resuscitate him, it wouldn't actually cause any damage. I don't know. And how they didn't feel that, I don't know. And then when he was talking to their doctor as he was saying his goodbye, he swiped this bottle of pills off her tray. So I don't know if it slowed his heart enough to make him appear dead or whatever the case may be. But you saw him, he swiped the pills, he took like 6 of them. And then when he was kind of dazed, he went on and, put the sheet around his neck, and he jumped off. And I guess what they heard was his feet banging up against the grate or something, and so which is why she went in and saw him, and they cut him down, and the whole thing. So while he was in the ambulance was stopped at a red light, and you see him, he get out the bag, and he was able to get out of the ambulance, and they just went on and pulled through the light. They weren't even paying attention. So yeah, that was interesting. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. How did you not see him sit up? Okay, this is a TV show. We gotta sometimes we just gotta roll with it. We just gotta roll with it. How they didn't find that netting under his shirt? Did they even try to perform CPR, or did they just assume he, like, okay. Anywho's, so Hassan's next stop was Annie Pellegrini, and he went to her apartment building, and swiped the card from one of the cleaners and was able to get in. And as soon as he walked, she saw him, she recognized who he was. And she basically told him that she was trying to help her father. She was the one that convinced him to sign the confession. I don't know if she thought that if he didn't, that her husband would have done something to him or to Hassan. And that's why she, forced him to do it. And she also felt like she'd had an agreement with the judge. The whole point of him signing the confession was so that he would get a lighter sentence. And she felt like the judge was strict, and ended up giving him whatever the sentence was. And she felt like, she was naive, and she believed, that things would work out. And then she tells him that, she's, been following him throughout his life as a child, and how she did what she could to help him. He's like, she sponsored him, and I guess as far as getting him into that private school and the whole thing. So she was with him throughout his life. And he basically said, you lie on my father. You basically forced him to sign his confession. He ends up committing suicide as a direct result of what you did. And now you want to clean your conscience. And she basically said that, I believe I had an agreement with this officer, and this officer, promised me that he would, things would go a different way. And she was like, what officer? And then she tried to play that, it was so long ago. And he was like, what officer? And then he found out that it was Inspector Dumont. And Inspector Dumont was the very officer that came to his apartment when he was a kid and basically dragged him away and put him in the system. So, yeah, that's okay. So then, there's this flashback of Hasan. He's at a private school, and these other kids are bullying him. And one of these other students stepped in and basically said they would call the principal and the whole thing. And this is when you see when he was introduced to Benjamin, who is still his friend, the guy who does the forgeries and, the whole thing. So I was like, okay, that was cool. I like that they showed that he stepped in to help him, and they've been friends all this time. And so back at the shop, Benjamin is working on what he's working on, and Hasan kind of stumbles upstairs, and they hug. He was happy to see him because he knew that was kind of tricky going into a prison, and if he was ever going to be able to get out, that was a lot. That was a lot. And so, of course, he was happy to see him. And later that night, he kept his promise to Etienne about, his wife. So he got into her apartment. She was sitting there watching TV. He was able to pick the lock and get in. And he moved her their wedding photo. You saw him pick it up, and then you saw him kind of slip out. And when he closed the door, I'm assuming he closed it that way so she could look, be forced to get up to check. And she went to check the door. It was locked. And then when she looked over, she saw their wedding photo that was laying down, and it had a stone on it that I'm assuming would be worth a lot of money. And of course, she smiled. So that was nice that he kept his promise to Etienne. I guess he figured he owed it to him. Etienne kept his father's promise, and he kept Etienne's promise. And that's how it went. So later that night, you saw him doing research on his father's case, and then he saw the officer's name, Gabriel Dumont, and you could see he's like, okay, that's his next target. So that's pretty much how this episode ended. It was good. It was really, really good. I liked the show, and I think there may be four more episodes left. So I can't wait to see what's next. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.